Let's move on to the Fifth Circuit. We're doing two tech segments, one about the FTC, but one now we're going to talk about a major decision out of the Fifth Circuit this week. Fascinating, actually. The NetChoice v. Paxton case has been a really interesting one to watch. And essentially, Ryan, what happened this week is a really big deal because it gives it puts wind into the sails of the conservative challengers. And it's very odd to see conservatives making the case that they are about Twitter and about social media companies in general. What did you make of what happened with the Fifth Circuit this week? Our friend Rachel Bovard was really happy about it. Maybe we can put her tweet up on the screen. Rachel said that here she goes. The Fifth Circuit just kicked big tech right where it hurts because NetChoice is a trade association of tech companies. And
so basically responding to conservative outrage that they're being censored on Facebook and on Twitter, Texas passed a law basically saying that big tech can't censor people, right? And that if you censor somebody unfairly, I think they allow some exceptions, like, death threats, that sort of very, very narrow exceptions.
And this is companies that have over, 50 million users?
Active users. So it's the biggest of the biggest tech platforms. They're saying that you're not a publisher, you're a platform, and therefore you have to allow people to speak. And so the Fifth Circuit, Florida did a similar piece of legislation, which was struck down by a different circuit. The Fifth Circuit now has upheld it and said that they don't have a right to censor on their platforms, which cuts fully against Section 230 and the law as we understand it now, which gives tech platforms carte blanche. It says it's your platform. You can do whatever you want with it. You can scrub whoever you want for whatever reason. Now
you're not a publisher. Right. You're not. It's not as though.
And you can't be sued for the things that people say on your platform.
Right. Ryan Grimm is not an author on the Twitter newspaper. Right. So Ryan Grimm can flame Sagar and Jetty.
Same with YouTube.
It's not, and it's not their fault. And that's what Section 230 essentially says. And I do, conservatives, to me, to a frustrating degree, obsess over censorship when the problems with tech are so much more vast and serious than just the censorship question. But this case, while it's about censorship, is about way more because it's about the economic status. It's about the status as corporations that we give. I mean, the special privileges that the government gives to these corporations to be run differently than other things. And partially, and one of the dissenting opinions from the Fifth Circuit was saying, listen, none of the precedent applies seamlessly. So your common carrier precedent doesn't apply seamlessly to big tech companies. And that's true. That doesn't mean it can't, though.
This is tricky stuff because all platforms need some form of moderation. If you've ever been on a forum that is completely unmoderated, it will just devolve into, basically just like porn and fighting and bots, right? And that's kind of where the internet.
You just described America in the 21st century: porn and fighting.
And then nobody wants to be on that platform. And so if you want a platform where you can, have discussions, and actually Twitter, total sideshow, Twitter does allow porn, but they're extremely good at just keeping it out of people's faces, unless people want it in their faces. But you're not. It's anyway.
Yeah.
So then the question is how do you allow a platform to moderate the conversation in a way that enables a conversation to take place without putting their political thumb on the scale in a way that's going to tick enough people off? Because the other thing I mentioned there is bots. Mm-hmm. So now, if this rule went into place and there was a $100,000 fine for every account that you censored unfairly, their attempts to root out bot farms and bots are always going to catch some people, because sometimes you'll dig deep into an account. You're like, I promise you this account is a bot. and you get to the bottom of it, it's like a person.
Yeah, it's real.
Which is almost scarier.
It's life imitating.
Yes.
Yeah, life imitating AI.
And so if that person got swept up in kind of a bot sweep, then they could sue for $100,000. And so then the companies then really pull back on their bot sweeps. So like, we don't want to catch it. We don't want to access. We got to very narrowly go after this. And then all the bot farms just grow like weeds. And so I think you do have to be careful about what you wind up with.
So there's a Vox article that I read on this, and I have it pulled up right now, where they call this an astonishing opinion. And I think, it is astonishing to the extent that it takes a really big legal step forward. It makes these very robust legal arguments in the direction of more regulation for Twitter and Facebook. And it really has rolled the ball down that hill. But it's interesting to me that the Vox article is lamenting this. It's just odd to see this from the left, right? Because they end their article saying the law is technically in effect, endangering the entire world's ability to openly debate ideas online. The tech companies are endangering the entire world's ability to openly debate ideas online. And for the sort of center left in the form of Vox to lament what I don't think is a perfect framework. I mean, I don't think anybody would argue that this is the perfect solution to the problem, so much as conservatives are are mounting these legal challenges in order to test how the law should apply to these companies. But to just sort of say that the decision itself is what's endangering the entire world's ability to openly debate ideas online, I think is absurd, because there was a period of time on the internet, pre-2016, when whatever you think of characters X, Y, and Z, of Alex Jones, of whomever, the internet, I would argue, was clearly a much better place for the open exchange of ideas than it is now. It was after the crackdown that things started to get worse and worse and worse. And there is a solution to this, and it's more speech and not hyperventilating and acting like an individual tweet is violence, or that people are too stupid to say, oh, this conspiracy guy in a tinfoil hat is probably someone I should double check.
I think it has less to do with the censorship crackdown and more to do with the way that powerful algorithms fueled social media in a way that didn't exist in, say, 2010, 2011. And so back then, you had Stormfront, you had Alex Jones, you had all of these, you had white supremacist forums, but in 100 years ago, you had white supremacist newspapers that would circulate around. But the white supremacist newspapers and the white supremacist forums didn't have the algorithmic capacity to get in the faces of tens of millions of people in a matter of hours or days. And that's what social media did. Is it kind of in a good way broke down the gates and broke down the barriers, but that allowed everything else to flow through too. And so now all of a sudden you start seeing, and it's easier also to get traction on the algorithm with something that's not true.
Yeah.
And it's also easier to get traction with something that's hateful, because that's the algorithm wants engagement. So people see something hateful, they engage with it. Boo this, or yay this.
Right.
And so the algorithm favors things that are false and favors things that are toxic.
And that's why I think Elon Musk has proposed this with Twitter, but I think being able to look at the algorithm and look what it's doing is important. Mm-hmm. But the problem at the end of the day is about algorithms that prize addiction, division, and hate. But we already know, we already have the old school ACLU sentiment, that everybody was always familiar with. More speech is always better than less. I mean, the South tried to censor anti-slavery pamphlets through the postal system. During the Civil War. And so, yes, there were absolutely white supremacy pamphlets that were being passed through the Postal Service, but it was also a method that abolitionists used to reach people. And that sort of tension, I mean, there's always going to be people who have bad ideas. And if we have platforms that are basically monopolies, there can be no other version of Facebook, because then there's no point to Facebook, because the whole point is your network is in one place. Same thing with Twitter. Then we should probably have them operate like we've traditionally had the American Public Square operate. But at the end of the day, that's why this is always just tinkering around the edges because we cannot operate our public square anymore because we don't, for a million different reasons that we can get into at a different time. But like that's what's at the bottom.
And we can talk about that more actually later in the show when we talk about the hearing with Lena Khan and the FTC and Josh Hawley and the big tech.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.